In the year 2025, Filipino workers sent home $36 billion in remittances. This amount surpasses the entire GDP of 100 countries. Filipino migrants have played a crucial role in shaping the skylines of Dubai, Singapore, and Hong Kong. They're the backbone of hospitals, the staff in hotels, and the educators for the children of the wealthy. However, here's the shocking reality. For the same job and the same work, Filipinos earn 40 to 60% less than their counterparts from Western countries. This is not a mere coincidence. Many labor experts label it as systemic exploitation, and the data backs this claim. Currently, over 10 million Filipinos work overseas, representing 10% of the entire Philippine population, all striving to support families back home. They take on roles as nurses in America, construction workers in Saudi Arabia, domestic helpers in Hong Kong, engineers in Singapore, and hospitality staff in Dubai. They leave their families, homes, and country behind because wages in the Philippines are insufficient for a decent living. Yet what they encounter abroad is not opportunity. It's a two-tier system where your passport dictates your paycheck. Consider the numbers. In Dubai, a Filipino construction engineer with 10 years of experience earns an average monthly salary of $3,000 to $4,500. In stark contrast, an American or British engineer with equivalent qualifications in the same role earns between $8,000 and $12,000 monthly. Same office, same projects, same responsibilities, yet their salaries can be double or even triple. Why does this happen? Because contracts are often structured based on nationality, not skill or performance, but rather where you were born. In Singapore, Filipino domestic workers receive a minimum wage of 570 Singapore dollars per month, which translates to about 420 US dollars. The troubling aspect is that the Singapore government establishes minimum wages according to nationality. Indonesian helpers have one minimum wage, while those from Myanmar have another. Critics argue that this system creates wage disparities based on nationality, and employers capitalize on this knowledge, paying Filipinos less because the Philippine government is so eager for remittances that they refrain from pushing back. Now let's turn our attention to Hong Kong, where over 200,000 Filipino domestic workers are employed. Known as helpers, they live in cramped quarters, work 7 days a week, and earn 4,730 Hong Kong dollars each month, approximately 600 US dollars. They clean homes, prepare meals, care for children, and look after elderly family members for families that rely on their support. However, they're classified as foreign domestic helpers, which means they have no avenue to attain permanent residency.
Despite years of dedicated work, they can never become citizens. They are deemed essential yet disposable. Now, here's where it gets even darker. Filipino migrants not only receive lower pay, they also face higher costs. Recruitment agencies in the Philippines impose placement fees that can amount to thousands of dollars just to secure a job abroad. These fees are illegal under international law, yet they are commonplace. A Filipino nurse heading to Saudi Arabia might incur fees ranging from $3,000 to $5,000, while a domestic worker going to Kuwait may pay around $1,500. Many enter into debt even before they begin working. Once they arrive, they often feel trapped. If they decide to quit, they risk losing their visa, and losing their visa could lead to deportation. Consequently, they endure abuse, wage theft, and exploitation with no viable options. Let's delve deeper into this issue and explore the Kafala system. This is the sponsorship system prevalent in Gulf countries such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Oman. Under the Kafala system, your employer acts as your sponsor. They hold your passport and control your visa. You cannot switch jobs without their approval, nor can you leave the country without their consent. If your employer decides not to pay you, your legal options are almost non-existent. Human rights organizations have labeled this situation as modern slavery. Many have drawn parallels to contemporary forced labor, leaving millions of Filipinos ensnared in it. The system reveals its cracks in times of crisis. In 2020, amid the pandemic, thousands of Filipino workers in the Gulf lost their jobs. However, they couldn't return home because their sponsors refused to release them. Unable to find new employment due to their visas being tied to their previous employers, they ended up living in overcrowded labor camps without income, food, or a means of escape. The Philippine government had to negotiate repatriation flights, but even then, many workers opted to stay. For them, returning home meant facing poverty. That's not a choice, it's desperation. Now, consider the construction workers who built Dubai. The Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, was erected by migrant laborers, including Filipinos, Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. They endured 12-hour shifts in extreme heat of up to 120 degrees. Residing in labor camps on the outskirts of the city, they were compensated a mere fraction of the project's worth. Dubai's skyline stands as a monument to exploitation, yet Filipino workers remain invisible in the narrative of its success. Now, let's examine the financial dynamics. The companies employing these workers are raking in billions. Dubai's construction sector is valued at over $100 billion, while Singapore boasts one of the richest economies per capita worldwide.
Hong Kong serves as a global financial hub. These places thrive on the backs of cheap migrant labor, maintaining low wages by recruiting workers from countries like the Philippines, where individuals are often desperate enough to accept any terms. To illustrate the pay disparity, consider salaries for similar jobs in the same city. In Singapore, a Filipino software engineer with 5 years of experience earns between 4,000 to 6,000 Singapore dollars per month. In contrast, an American software engineer in the same position earns between 8,000 to 12,000 Singapore dollars, while a European engineer takes home 7,000 to 10,000. With identical coding skills, projects, and deadlines, the Filipino earns half. And if you ask human resources, they'll call it the market rate. This so-called market rate effectively means they pay based on the desperation of your home country. The healthcare sector presents an even more egregious gap. A Filipino nurse in Saudi Arabia earns between $1,500 to $2,500 monthly, while a British or American nurse in the same hospital receives between $5,000 to $8,000. Both care for the same patients, work the same shifts, and bear the same life or death responsibilities. Yet the Filipino nurse receives only a third of the pay, allowing the Saudi hospital to save millions by hiring Filipinos over Westerners. This isn't a labor shortage, it's a wage arbitrage scheme. Let's turn our attention to domestic workers, where the abuse is most apparent. In Kuwait, Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia, countless stories emerge of Filipino domestic workers facing beatings, starvation, sexual assault, and imprisonment at the hands of their employers. Tragically, some have lost their lives. In 2018, the Philippine government took the drastic step of banning workers from traveling to Kuwait after a Filipina was discovered dead in a freezer. But the ban was lifted after Kuwait promised reforms that never materialized. The abuse persists. Why does this happen? Because domestic workers are often isolated, living in their employers' homes without days off or privacy. If they voice complaints, they risk deportation. If they flee, they become undocumented and lose all legal protections. Employers are fully aware of this imbalance. The system is structured to grant them complete control. This isn't employment, it feels more like ownership. Now let's consider the economic reality. In the year 2025, remittances from Filipinos amounted to $36 billion, accounting for 8.5% of the Philippines' GDP. The country's economy heavily relies on exporting its people. The government labels them Overseas Filipino Workers, or OFWs, and hails them as heroes. Yet heroes shouldn't have to pay a price for their heroism. They shouldn't be exploited. The painful truth is that the Philippine government benefits from this arrangement. Remittances are vital for the economy. Consequently, there is little political motivation to advocate for improved wages or working conditions abroad. To illustrate the cost to Filipino families, consider a mother who travels to Hong Kong to work as a domestic helper. She leaves behind 3 children, only seeing them once every 2 years when she can afford the flight home. She misses birthdays, graduations, and first heartbreaks. While she raises someone else's children, her own grow up without her. After 2 decades of hard work, she returns home with some savings, but her children hardly know her. This is the human cost of remittances, fractured families, and lost childhoods. And this reality affects millions.